the most important thing is to make sure that you are accurately being able to predict who's going to buy in the future. Welcome to the State of CRM podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Ben.
And this week we'll be talking a little bit about something different. So we're going to talk about acquisition. We talk a lot about CRM. And this week we're just going to pivot a bit because within our conversations about CRM, we talk obviously a lot about first-party data usage. And in a world where acquisition costs are increasing, targeting is becoming more difficult, acquisition marketers should be, and in some cases are, leaning a lot more into their first-party data. So today's discussion is going to be sort of surrounding the importance of first-party data within the acquisition ecosystem and some of the things marketers can think about and strategies they can deploy to use first-party data for acquisition.
Yeah, and Matt, that's no secret. That's the attention of consumer is fragmented in a lot different ways. That can be really a lot of different channels. We mention them often on the podcast, but there are a lot of different channels, but also these channels can be seen in different screens. And so the attention is really spread out between different screens, different channels, and so the attention is complicated to get. There is a lot of competition to really get attention for your brand from the customer point of view, and they are exposed. Consumer are exposed to a lot of messages, and that's more and more difficult to be able to get out of the crowd and being sure that your message is seen. And the big question is that how do you improve this targeting, this capability to send the right message and expose the right consumer with the right message? That exists for a long time. That's not new on the market, but usually companies for this type of campaign and acquisition campaign are using and were using and are still using third-party data. The issue is that third-party data is more and more expensive, less and less accurate, costs you an additional tickets to redress, to correct them, to fix, and to be sure that the data is improve that's really works correctly with your system too. So redressed, all the work on the data that you can acquire with third-party provider makes the costs increasing a lot, and we know that's mentioned that the fact that efficiency can go down because of the volume of message that every brands are sending.
Yeah. And I think, to your point around ad saturation, which has been obviously a big issue, but we'll be primarily talking about digital today when we're talking about things like data costs and third-party data-driven targeting and whatnot. But obviously it applies to all channels, but especially over the last few years, the rise of digital commerce has meant that more and more brands are leaning into digital advertising in terms of increasing spend. We've also seen, to your point, Ben, an increase in channels, which means, like you were saying earlier, attention's divided. And the issue being, and this is kind of where we're tying it into what we usually talk about around CRM, is how do you create relevant experiences for your audiences? And when we talk about relevant experiences in CRM, we talk about delivering things that customers would be interested in engaging with, like finding the right product, for example. And then you see things like your open rates and your click rates all increase because you've created that relevant experience. Well, it's not different in acquisition. And so to your point around rising data costs, when marketers are seeking to create relevant experiences within acquisition, it becomes more difficult when third-party data is more expensive. And in a lot of cases, the third-party data you get is out of date or unusable. I think there's just some statistics regarding that are kind of interesting. 44% of marketers rely primarily on third-party data for acquisition. And bad third-party data impacts about 88% of brands' bottom line. So there's this heavy reliance on something that's expensive and in a lot of cases ineffective. And so acquisition marketers are sort of caught between a rock and a hard place because you need to have a digital presence. That's where attention is. Even the way consumers are consuming TV is digital now. However, being able to reach them across those channels at scale is becoming difficult and more expensive. So acquisition is a challenging place to be right now.
Yeah, and was mentioning the cleaning part of the acquisition of data or third-party data, and the cleaning costs after buying data. I mean, the same study is mentioning that 34% of the player rely on cleaning solution, such as Experian. The study is coming from them, and they provide this service. But also, that's a step that even if you don't use a provider for that, a lot of companies are doing, because almost 25% of them are also doing that manually or internally. Yeah. And all this work to improve, correct, clean the data you are getting from outside source. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of investment in time to less and less effective results. So if you keep going on with this third-party data process integration for acquisition, because of all we mentioned, just mentioned on competition and more and more difficult ways to contact customers, you'll have to invest more in more data. You invest more to clean them, and so your investments increase and your return, your performances decrease. So the return on investment can't go up, and that's an issue, because that's just a finite. I mean, there is an end to that. That's you can't scale it. You can't really scale it. And to add something else in the equation, the cost of the technology to run all of that increase too, because you are managing more data points and more information. And when you match more data, that's will increase the cost of the technology you use to do that. But something that's we can also mention is that it's more difficult because of the regulations.
Yeah.
And regulation on third-party data make it more and more complicated.
Yeah. I think there's lots of studies that have been done for like analyzing sort of like every dollar of advertising spend on media, like how much of that actually generates impressions that are valuable, like that where some human being actually sees your ad, and that human being is somebody you actually want to see your ad. And after some of those costs that you mentioned, Ben, around data costs and tech costs, and then you have your agency costs, and then you have lost media due to poor targeting, like reaching irrelevant customers, and then you have lost media due to ad fraud, and then you have lost media spend due to unviewable ads as well. So it is difficult for acquisition marketers, to your point, to really like dive in and establish or gain that ROI when budgets are kind of chipped away at each of those layers. And there's definitely other ways, or there's ways to solve or to mitigate all of those things. But specifically in regards to the targeting inefficiencies as well as data costs, that's really where first-party data is increasingly becoming important, but also is going to be the future for acquisition targeting. And we talk a lot about it within CRM. You essentially can use your first-party data to find the right products for your customers, or match your customers with the right relevant experiences or products in your catalog. And bang, you see higher ROI and better marketing metrics as well. Well, like we mentioned at the beginning, the same is for acquisition. And so, you mentioned been like regulation, whether it's self-regulation from tech companies or government regulation. It makes it difficult to procure and to use third-party data. It also makes it difficult to target because at some point in the future, we know that cookies will be going away. I know the date for Google specifically is kind of a bit of a moving target, but we know it's imminent and it's coming, and we've known that for a while. And so there are solutions obviously for the targeting piece and helping with identity. Different platforms have different IDs and things that they can use, but in terms of being able to collect the data and scrape it and understand, like, essentially, there's a lot of targeting that's based on, okay, well, they've looked at these ads or they've interacted with these types of things in the past. Let's cookie them and target them again. Well, that's not going to work anymore. Audience building is going to become a lot more sophisticated than that. And that's where first-party data comes into play, because this is data that is, first of all, it's free. Brands already have access to this. You don't have to buy your own first-party data. Obviously, it's limited based on what you're allowed to collect, which your customers are willing to share with you. But, things like transaction data, for example, that is something that every company has in some form. So, it's also more accurate. Ben, you mentioned there's costs to clean the data. A lot of like third-party data that you can procure isn't even, like, you're paying for a lot of it that's not even usable. First-party data is accurate, especially if you have it structured in a way where you're able to get it in a clean way where you can use it. Even if not, there's ways to clean it up, obviously, but it is inherently more accurate because you're collecting it yourself.
And that's what you mentioned, Matt, is super interesting. That we're saying that on one end we have the third-party data that is expensive to acquire, expensive to clean, and either if the treatment of that is internal or external, that takes time or part of budgets and money. The pro for the first party data is that, as you said, that it's free to collect, or almost, but way cheaper. That's less effort to clean because, as you mentioned, that's your data, that's your customer. So that's usually a better match. And so investing time from the team, from the project team, from the IT team, data team working on integrating this first-party data into the system that are used for acquisition, that's worth it because this time is already spent anyway. Maybe not by the same team, but the time or the budget of that is spent with, as you were mentioning, agencies or other provider. But that's something that is one way or the other. The money is spent and the time is spent, the bandwidth is spent to use the data on acquisition. You can use the same amount of time to make your first-party data available for acquisition. And the effectiveness of that, the potential growth scale of your first-party data and the usage of your first-party data is way better because nobody is reducing the capability of collecting this data because that's just based on your traffic, your revenue, your purchases.
Yeah, and kind of also it's sort of omnichannel in the sense of you can use it to help your targeting or more effectively target in different environments. So whether it's connecting into Facebook or walled off social supply, or if you're looking to target programmatically on the open web, this data can be used essentially to help in targeting in all of those areas. So it's sort of future-proofed in the sense that it's not like applicable on the open web or it's just existing within the Facebook ecosystem. It's something that really is available for marketers if they know how to use it to basically get them ahead on targeting in all of those different environments. And so I guess the question begs itself, like, how do you actually do this? Like, what is... I have my first-party data, lots of different data points on lots of different customers, have my transaction data. Ultimately, what do I do next? Like, how does this help me? And I think that's probably the question on everyone's mind right now.
Yeah, that's, fair question. That's first-party data. That's mean I already know them, so that's no longer acquisition. So the best usage of this first-party data would be to identify in your database who is buying a product, who is most likely to purchase the product or to purchase again, or the likelihood or the interest, the propensity for a category of products. So all these things that we are talking over and over in the podcast will help you to expand your strategy in acquisition. And by that, I mean that you will, let's say you want to promote a polo. You will identify who is interested by buying a product in the polo category on your website or in your stores. And from this group of people interested right now by buying a polo, you can seed that to this open web or display provider. You mentioned some, but I mean, all of them are accepting lists from you. That means programmatic, all DSP, independent DSP, Google, Facebook, Criteo. I mean, all of them, you can work with them to import your segments, your group of audience. That's are people interested by one category or one type of product or one product, one SKU. We were talking about identifying propensity of people to buy a SKU for CRM, for email, for push. But that's the same, that you have this audience that you will feed the platform, the acquisition platform with, and based on their data, based on their ecosystem, they will be able to first target these people, but most likely they are known for that on your system, so maybe they already purchased. What you really want to do acquisition is find lookalikes of this audience. So people might have the same type of profile based on the behavior and the data point of the ecosystem you are providing. You want to target, or you are running your acquisition campaign.
Yeah, and I think like the important thing is to make sure that seed audience that you're using to find lookalikes on activation platforms, again, whether it's Facebook or the open web, what have you, that seed audience is accurate. So you need to be able to, the most important thing is to make sure that you are accurately being able to predict who's going to buy in the future. And I think like that goes back to sort of like some of the stuff we've been talking about around making sure that you have the right capabilities to be able to do that, because obviously you have your transaction history, but that doesn't necessarily always predict who is going to buy in the future. But it does give you an indication or the data that you need to be able to do that. So like, just because somebody bought something in the past doesn't mean they'll buy it in the future. But taking your transaction data and being able to understand who has bought in the past and then looking for certain traits that indicate a likelihood to do that, using sort of, to your point, lookalike modeling, will help you be able to do that accurately, and creating that like accurate seed segment that you can then push into activation platforms is key to getting off on the right foot. So again, like you have the data you need to be able to do this, but you need to make sure that you have the right like AI and machine learning capabilities to be able to help build that seed audience. It would be the same way that you do it for CRM, to your point. But then what you're going to do is basically push that into activation platforms that can go into the acquisition ecosystem, into the open web and walled garden environments, and basically find people that look like those people that are most likely to buy.
Yeah, and that's so something really important you're saying, Matt, that the way you do or you build audience for CRM is that you will find people with interest for the product you want to, or the offer you want to promote, based on criteria that can be manual audience selection, or that can be AI driven selection. But you are using some data points to identify an audience. If you are running your CRM campaign, maybe the data points you choose or the AI choose and allow you to select a volume is a little bit small for the goal of your campaign, and you know that's maybe the product or brand is well known and gets a nice impact with your consumer, or there are a lot of customers can be interested, and even if they are not super interested, super likely to purchase right now, you still want to extend a little bit the volume of this audience for your campaign, and that's fine to do it. So let's say for CRM, you will be able to select, and you are building audience that represent 5, 20 to 25, 30% of your database. In the case of the acquisition, you don't want to do that. You want to do and to keep really something narrow, super precise. Because if you provide an audience that is too large and you provide 50% of your database as an example of people interested by a specific product, and you ask and you're setting up the platform, the acquisition platform, to find lookalikes of these people and expose your campaign for acquisition, they will do lookalike of the 50% you uploaded. So that's mean people super likely to purchase, or with really a big interest for your product, but also people you added to get volume that are a little bit less likely to purchase. So what I'm saying is, long story short, is the fact that for CRM, if you extend the target because you are sending and controlling who you are contacting, you can still do it. That's a choice. I mean, that's definitely a business choice that you can take. Don't do that on the acquisition part. Do the extension and getting more volume. You want a certain reach on the acquisition part. We are 100% aligned with that, but do that on the platform, on the volume of the lookalike you will find, not on the seed. That's really giving the prototype, the example of the people you want to find. You need to provide something super precise to the platform, and then saying that, okay, please find and display the ads to people that look like this model, this seed, this group of people that are super interested by my product. And the volume of people the platform will find can be 100,000 or 2 million. That's your choice to be more or less precise, and for the platform to expand that for the acquisition part. And most likely you maybe want to adapt your bids to based on how far and how you grow the list, the size of the list, and maybe you don't want to pay the same price for people a little bit less likely or with a lower rank or lower similarity of your seed. But you need to really to keep on this small amount of people, of consumer, as an example for this platform.
Yeah. I think to your point, you don't need to necessarily trade off scale, but I think it is important to note as well that, if you're looking to target only high propensity buyers for a specific product, to your point, maybe blue polos or what have you in your product catalog, that targeting only those that are likely to buy or be interested in that might mean that you are, in some cases, sacrificing some scale. But this isn't a branding campaign. You're not looking to we're not talking about generating awareness for your company. We're talking about
acquisition.
We're talking about acquisition and conversions for a specific product or offering. So, it's okay to do that if your cost of acquisition goes down. And then you can use that media budget to promote something else and find likely buyers for another offer. And you have the opportunity to do more specifically targeted campaigns from an acquisition perspective, but do a higher volume of them. And what you're going to see in that situation is your cost of acquisition going way down for multiple reasons. But specifically in this case, your targeting is more efficient. your data costs are going down and your tech costs are going down. And so, it's a win-win-win in that regard.
Yeah, and you're still competing with people who are using third-party data to display the campaign. So if you have better efficiency, better performances and return based on that, based on the practice, you will also get more exposure and more impression compared to audiences based on third-party data. Again, we mentioned that's like maybe 25 times in the episode, but the third-party data is already expensive, and that will keep going up. I mean, that's not stopping. That will be more and more complicated to have clean, effective third-party data, and all of that will make the price really increase.
Yep, 100%.
That's the end of today's episode, and special notes because that's the last episode for you, Matt. We'll continue for sure the podcast, but that will be without Matt as a co-host, as Matt is leaving the company soon. That was really nice to do 46 episodes right now for this season 1 of the podcast, and we'll find and evolve maybe in the formats, getting additional guests. So let me know what you want. Again, and we always said that what are the topics that you have an interest for, what you like to listen to, any question or point of view that you would like to discuss. Happy to have you on the show, or getting the topic or the question before the recording and addressing that during the episode.
Yeah, it's been. I just want to say it's been so much fun. I think over a year ago we just had an idea to start doing this, and we set up some recording equipment in a conference room and recorded our first episode, and it's just grown so much from there. And for me, it's been an incredibly fun experience doing over 40 episodes over the last year or so. It's just been an incredible journey, and such an awesome experience for me. To be completely honest, I never thought I would be hosting a podcast in my life, and it's been really fun to do this with Ben. And I have nothing but confidence that the podcast is gonna. State of CRM is going to continue to evolve and continue to provide tons of great and interesting content for everybody. So I want to thank all of the listeners for listening to me talk to you for the last year or so. And I know I'll be an interested subscriber in the State of CRM podcast in the future, and can't wait to see how it grows from here. And so thank you very much.
Right. Talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.